Billy said his dad and I grew up here. We were really close friends, and we did play Lone Ranger and Tonto in the house where Janet and Ken Fry's house is. At that time, it was all grown up with vines and little trees over the vines, and we could hide and we fought at the time. So we want to be Lone Ranger and we want to be Tonto. So, thank you. So we decided that every other recess we'd change. This recess included a Ranger, not influence every change. Anyway, today I'm going to talk a little bit about my life, how I got here to Barnitz, and also about the mill, about the school, about the church, and some stories about all of that that happened. So we're going to start out with how I arrived here. My dad worked at the Carlisle Shoe Factory with a whole bunch of other people. John McCoy was one of them. They were great friends. And my uncle, Herman Dyke, worked for the Barnitz family at the mill. And by the name of Paul Sunday, they called him P.O. Sunday, bought from the Barnitz family a grain mill. It was not, didn't make flour, it was only a feed store. In Carlisle on West Street, right beside the railroad. Anybody remember that? Can't find that. So when that was sold to Paul Sunday, my uncle decided to go and work for Paul Sunday. And that left a job open at Barnitz Mill. And my uncle called my dad and said, hey, there's a job open for a truck driver, and whatever else is needed in the mill, you ought to go to talk to Mr. Barnitz. And he did, and Mr. Barnitz, William B. Barnitz, hired him. We moved here in the fall of '37. And my dad started his job. This is my dad, my brother Kenneth, and me. This is my brother Kenny and I. He was the ball player. He had a glove on me before I was able to stand up. So anyway, Bill Barnitz, my brother at the time, we moved here, was in bed. And we later found out that he had blood poison from a broken hip, and they didn't have penicillin. It was just in the works back then in the 30s. And Kenneth passed away at the age of 10. While he was in bed at our house, which is first place down the road, when you go out on the fine road and turn to the left, it's the first place on the right. Julie lives there now with their son, Henry. So William Barnitz came up to our house when my brother was in bed and said, to visit him, he said, I'm going to go on a trip with my aunt and uncle. Now this was told to me by my mother. I was only 3. Several times he told me this story. He said, I'm going to go to Africa with my aunt and uncle. He was their chaperone. And he said, when I come back, I'm going to come up and get you, and we're going to take a hike up into the mountain. And not too long ago, I was talking to the one Barnitz person that is surviving. It's Barbara Lilly. She lives on one of the Barnitz farms up on North Dickinsville Road. And I was talking to her at a funeral of friends of both of ours. And we got to talking about different things, and I asked her if she remembered about her dad coming up to see my brother. He said, I was with him. She was the same age as my brother. She's 7 years older than I am, so most of you know how old I am. So she's 97. And still pretty good. I've talked to her several times on the phone. I haven't been at the house. But anyway, he went on his trip with his aunt and uncle. And word came back that William Barnitz drowned in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm getting behind on my pointer. Anyway, he drowned in the article when the paper said it took him 4 days to find his body, but they did find it, and he is buried along with everyone in the family except Barbara at this time in the Mount Holy Spring Cemetery. If you go in there on the side opposite the railroad tracks, there's a big mountain stone. Maslin is on one side and Barnitz is on the other. So that's the story of Bill Barnitz. My brother, by the way, passed away within weeks after Bill Barnitz drowned. Okay. I voted for the fifth. This is a picture of school, which I'll be talking more about. And everybody see, no, you can't see. This was the day in school here that we were allowed to bring our other stories, that we were allowed to bring the brothers and sisters. This is my sister. This is me on the bike. Who knows Paul Brehm? That's him. Janet Rocky Fry. Think I got her voice. This is Janet sitting there. Who else is here?
Jane Dillard, Madeline Kaufman,
Pardon me?
Madeline, or not Madeline, Mary Ann Kaufman,
Mary Ann Kaufman?
Jane Dillard,
This is Laura Stroud.
yeah. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
That would be,
This is the nailer girl, and so is that. But anyway, these are kids that went to school here at the time. And actually it was supposed to be all girls. But Paul Brown and I snuck in there. So anyway,
You still have that bike, don't you, Dad?
pardon me?
You still have that bike.
Yes, I still have that bike. It has 1,000,000 miles on it. This is my home. Down the road, first place on the right, where Julie lived. And this is a picture from where the floodgates and all that was. And this is a picture from the other direction. This house wasn't there at the time. Paul Berry built that. And there was a porch here. Mr. Bretzman put that on. We lived there from 37, and my parents moved away in 1958. There was no facilities in the house. Barnitz family owned the house. That went along with somebody that worked at the mill. The rent was, what do you think? $6 a month. There was no facilities in the house. My grandchildren can't imagine living in a house without a bathroom. We did. We carried our water in from the well in a bucket, set it on a table, that's what we drank out of. Everything had to be carried, wash water in the water. It's right there. And everything had to be ladled over into it was heated in the wash house. Ladled over into a wooden washing machine, which was run by hand. That was part of my job. And that's just the way it was with the night house. How many had a night house? How did you know? Did. Okay. The Barnitz family. We'll talk about them a little bit. We knew her as Grandma Barnitz.
What'd you make of?
Herman Works Barnitz was the name she liked to go by, but she was also Mrs. Ulysses Grant Barnitz, which was this man, William B. Barnitz, dad. So, Grandma Barnitz owned everything, even in my time. The William B. Barnitz family didn't control the ownership of everything until Grandma passed away. My mother attended Carlisle Market, baked goods. Grandma Barnitz lived in the Palmford Apartments, and when my mother would sell enough pie and cake for $6, she'd hand it to me and say, "Go pay Grandma Barnitz the rent." That happened once a month. Grandma Barnitz would invite me in and tell me to have a seat and give me something to drink. And then she would start questioning me. How's the corn crop look at Barnitz? Apparently, Mrs. William Barnitz or anybody didn't tell her how things were. And she questioned me about it, and I'd tell her, "Oh, it looks pretty good," or whatever. So, anyway, that's her riding in her car. This is in front of the old Church of God home out on North Handle Street. I don't know what kind of car that is. Do you, Ken? No. Anyway, that's her taking a ride. Now, there's the story of William B. Barnitz, but half the take on. This is from the Sentinel in March 1938. And, that's just the whole story. This is a story that was in the Sentinel in 82, telling about the Barnitz. And the other Barnitz, they were all rich people, according to my thoughts, and they were. The Barnitz, Mrs. UG, later on, everything went to William D. Barnitz family. They owned 5 farms and 5 houses. The house I grew up in was one of them. And the grain from all those farms had all the grain, but the Barnitz family got half of it, and the farmer got half of it. They called that farming on the half. I didn't tell you, the Barnitz family, William Barnitz family had 2 daughters, Janet and Barbara. Janet was a school teacher in Baltimore, and later life after she graduated. The Barnitz girls never went to school here. were shipped off to Carlisle to relatives and friends and went to school in Carlisle. And I'm almost positive, although I can't say for sure, but I think they went to private schools for high school. They didn't graduate from Carlisle High School. Okay. This is all my dad's writing. And here is a note that my dad wrote in about William Barnitz drowning. And there's a name on there, William March. Can you read? Can you see that on this side?
Yeah.
That's Billy's grandpa. He bought something. I forget what it was. But these are all people that dealt at the mill. And see the prices?
No, tell us what they are.
Well, I'll have to walk over there. 50 pound of pig tail, 90 cents. Short bear. That was that wasn't his real name. But he got quite a lot of stuff there, and that was $28. That must have been quite a lot. Anyway, stuff was very on the koi, 50 pound guy is. Bill Murphy. He lived in one of the Barnitz farms. Now here, this is Friday, March 18th. And this is all, this was Friday, and Friday was the day that Mount Holly Springs was delivered their flower. They were all businesses of Mount Holly Springs. That was before some of the people that know places down there now. None of these are there now. They were all people that my dad hauled with stuff to, and they paid for it, and then he entered it in the ledger when he was actually milled. So. I'm way behind my paperwork. Oh, we're gonna talk about the church. Okay, everybody knows where the church is. How many in there now go to church? Open hand up. That's a good many. So anyway, Barnitz Church was, everything at that time was called Pines. Pine Road, Pines Church, Pines Methodist Church, Pines Schoolhouse. And that changed over the year to different things. We changed from just Pines Methodist Church to Pines United Methodist Church. And now we're back to plain Barnitz Church. This is what it looked like. This is where the mower was kept. And down here a little farther along the woods was where the outhouse was. And in this structure, I'm going to say in the mid-40s, we had 100 kids in Sunday school. Sometimes over 100. And we were all in that little square building. And one thing I wanted to point out was, this is down here at the end between here and Fry's house. They were supposed to have swings on. They did at one time, but not while I went here to school. So anyway, we're talking about the church now, so we'll have more about that later. This is when the addition was put on, And before this fire that the March family put on, and before the nice windows that are in now gone, and before the old porch that was gone. But this was the addition. So, that was a nice color picture. This is, Bill McCoy put that on, and I don't think the new windows are in there yet. But I think we have a picture showing that it was. Just not too long ago, a strong wind came through and blew the roof off the church. Anybody remember that?
Yes.
No. It took it clear off. And luckily, the rain and everything else that could have happened didn't, and we didn't get any damage to the inside of the church. But I started going there, and as soon as we moved here, my parents started going to the Barnitz church. So I was 3, so apparently I've been going there for 87 years. And the only person that's been going there longer than me is Janet. I'm not going to tell you how old Janet is, but she graduated a year ahead of me in high school. By the way, Janet's dad and mother, family, had a little farm down the road. How can I say that? Where the animals are now, the sheep, it's the first place below Birdhouse Road on the left. That was her home. And I walked down there to get our milk. That's where we got 2 quarts of milk. I walked down and get the milk with a jar left for the next day. And Janet attempted to teach me to ride a bike. She finally succeeded. But I walked home lots of times limping because I fall and sprained my ankle. Okay, this is a good story. This is the school as it was. It looks like this rail fence is real close to school. When I went there, it wasn't that close. But the rail fence was there. This was a coal shed. And the 11 houses, the boys were from this side and the girls were from the other side. One of the kids who lived up the road stopped in at Newell Wilson, we called him New, and said, "Would you mind if we use the rail to make a seesaw out of your fence?" He said, "No, I don't mind if you put it back." So we'd take the rail off, stick it to the fence, and that was our seesaw. That's a true story. Tell me something before I get to this one. Back in the day, all of the school directors were farmers. And Lawrence Weary was the school director for Dickinson Township in charge of supplies. Now I want you to listen close to this, how it was back then. He would come to this door, knock on the door, the teacher would go to the door, and I never seen Lawrence Weary with a smile. He'd say, "How many students?" This was first day of school. "How many students do you have?" "Well, we usually had 25 or 30. And she'd tell us, 25. He'd say, "Okay." He'd turn around and go back out to his old Dodge 4-door car. He farmed, by the way, along the York Road. And he'd open the trunk and count out 25 tablets, regular tablets, 25 spelling tablets. Anybody know what I mean by a spelling tablet? It's a little narrow tablet that you've done the spelling on. And 25 pencils. And bring them up and hand them to the teacher. Then he would say, "How are your books?" And she might say, we could hear the conversation. I've heard it 16 times because he came twice a year. She'd say, "Well, I think I have a seventh grade math book. It's pretty shabby." He said, "Let me see it." So he'd look at it, read through it, and say, "That'll do at least another year." While I was here, although we may have got some, I don't remember ever getting a new book. Now, what do you think that budget was? It has been next to nothing. It was a tight deal back then, for whatever reason. So here's my first grade picture, 1939. I was 5. Steve circled that, but I usually tell everybody if I'm the guy with a nice white shirt. So here's Janet. You got that picture, Janet? Sure you do. Here's Marianne and Madeline. Here is Billy's dad. Again, side by side. Kenny Wolf, Glenn Turley, Johnny Clippinger, Harold Clippinger, George and J. Rowd,
Mark Herrick.
Pete Herrick. This is Janet's cousin, Veda Berry, Marty Hope, Helen Boyd, Janet Hope, Esther Schaefer, Emmett Schulenberg. He was in 8th grade when I was in 4th. I found out that I didn't like school. I didn't like school. So, I'm not. And I found out that if I said I had a headache, the teacher let me come home. I was only 5. Can you imagine sending a 5-year-old out down the road today? I don't think I'd do that. Anyway, I go home as soon as I get home, I was fine. Now I got late for 2 days. The mother went out and got a switch off the wire and brought me back to school the whole way. And I told her later in life, I said, that was the best afternoon I ever had. I didn't get a headache yet. Now here's the schoolhouse with the pad that's out here that the porch is on right now, and with the kitchen added. Before it was here and here with a porch. That's what the porch was attached to, the old porch. You can see pictures like that. So that's what it looked like right after the church bought this building in 1954. When I went to school here, there was no electric in the building. Now, everybody would say, how do you see? Well, whatever light came in the windows, because there was a chandelier hanging up there. There's one of the lights, the kerosene lights that was in the chandelier. They were never lit while I went to school here. You had to get up on a ladder or something to light them. That didn't happen. This is pretty much what it looks like right now. It's changed quite a bit. Whenever the church bought it, they put the electric in, added the kitchen, and the slab of the porch later put this on, and so on and so forth. Okay. Well, this is Susie Barrett isn't here. This was Susie Barrett, Susie and Glenn. She usually comes. Okay. Larry's sister, Larry Barrett, sister for you. Peggy Eckenrode, that's Danny Eckenrode's mother. Larry's sister, Phyllis. Phyllis Jane, we call her Janie. Cheryl McCoy, who I grew up with like brothers. And we fought like brother and sister too. This is Joan Posey, Joan McCoy. There's Janet again. And Marlon Mark, Billy's dad. This is George Mark. This is Harold Victor, Joyce's husband. Passed away. This is me. This is Kate. At the time she was Easter. This is Peggy's brother. We call him Buzzy Eckenrode. Jay Ralph, Creighton Victor, Phil and Faye McCoy, Ray Bear, Susie and Glenn. We all joined the church. That's a picture of all of us joining the church in approximately 1947. Well, now, Barry, I thought this was yours, I'm not sure. This is Reverend Kerr giving communion to a lot of the people that you saw in the picture, a lot of young people at in the church. And sorry to say, we don't have a lot of young people now, which we did. This was a Sunday school class. You know who it is?
Bill Beezer.
Bill Feaser. Evelyn Eckenrode was the teacher. And there's quite a few people in there that I pointed out before. Notice the pews. Now the chairs. We can seat a lot more people, but we don't have as many people to seat. Not me. Carol Pickford, Jay Russ, Katie Rodwell, one of the ladies. No, she's not a. This is Brett's. These are the Yarlets. They operated the store that was right out there. Katie Whitmer. And some of the other. That's Ray Bear's wife. Okay. This is after the addition was put on. And a gentleman from New Jersey who moved up here to retire, Mr. Pepper, built a house right south of around here. And Anna McCoy, that's Grant's wife. This is my sister. And Barry, you're probably on that one too, but I can't point check. This is, guess who? This is Beverly Stein, Beverly Moore, Billy's aunt. And teaching, I think I was probably kindergarten class, right? Wow, that was in the room as you go in the side door on the back. That's a good thing. Barnitz Church also sponsored a Boy Scout troop. And there's Bill Rowell, Joe Klopper, Billy's dead. He was one of the leaders. Here's John Barry's brother, Earl. I can't say it, Earl. He turned out to be a Methodist minister, just passed away a short time ago. Ray, Ray the Welder, help me.
Yeah, I can't think of shit. Sorry.
Well, anyway,
Not fair.
pardon?
Not Barry.
I'll think about it, tell you
That's all right.
after consent. Okay, now you're gonna see some Barnitz people of the name of Barnitz. This is Daniel Eckenrode. This is a groundbreaking for the new edition. This is Mrs. William B. Barnitz. John McCoy. Grandma Barnitz. The preacher. Help me, Janet.
Is that Steiner?
Steiner, thank you. Reverend Steiner and Pete Posey, that's Harold Posey, that's Joan's husband, who lives up close here now. That was a groundbreaking. This is the old parsonage. Reverend Kerr lives here, that's his old Plymouth, because he garage back there. And this is right back the road here, beside the new parsonage, which is here, back here. And Pete Posey lived there. There was no shower, and he used to get down to the creek and shower. He said, "Boy, that was cold." So anyway, that's the story of that. Now, this is a picture of Grandma Barnitz and my dad, Reverend Hahn, which filled in as a pastor here. He was in charge of the United Methodist Home for Children. And Peter March, Billy's great grandfather. Yeah, no. Earl Junior McCoy took that picture and he cut Grandpa March off for some reason. But my dad is accepting the key to that old parsonage from Grandma Barnitz. She still owned all that stuff. They owned everything. They owned his phone line and everything. Okay, now we're going to the mill. There's a lot of types of mill. This is a bridge down at Joyce's house. That's the way it looked way back. There's some more pictures. I don't know who the kids are, but that's a close-up of kids. And that's on the mill side of the bridge.
We used to drive our car and wash the car.
Pardon me?
We used to wash the car in the creek.
They used to drive their car into the creek to wash.
Oh, we did that also up at Roush.
Uh-huh.
You'd probably be put in jail for that.
Right.
So this is Joyce's house. And this is before I had any blacktop. This is the barn. The Barnitz house is approximately right here. And it looks to me this is before the tenant house where Cretan and Carolyn lived. There's no house there. But this barn, it originally belonged to the Barnitz house. That was one of the farms they owned. And later, the tenant house was put here, and that's in my time where the Hope family did it. So, here is looking from Joyce's house across to the farm. It was originally the Steigelman farm. Later on, it became Barry's home. Now, the Steinman family we tore the house down, the church was property, and on the church there, and they owned this farm when I was a kid. And Mr. Steinman would walk from the farm up to their house here, and I'd be out. Sometimes he'd wave to me and so on and so forth. They brought a African American out from Virginia to work for them. And when they quit farming and sold the farm, Mrs. Barnitz took him. His name was Elisha Brown. Elisha lived in an apartment over the garage at the Barnitz home. He called my dad Mr. Mill and called me Ronnie Boy. He had a bicycle too, and he must have rode it 1,000,000 miles too, but that was his way of transportation. He rode the car out. We used to pass him still going in. Whenever Mrs. Barnitz went to Rehoboth Beach for several weeks, I don't know how long, it was a long time. Elisha could not read or write. He wasn't even sure how old he was. But he would bring the mail to my mother every day. And he knew from Mrs. Barnitz what item to specially look for. So my mother would read the envelope to him and open it and read it to him, and he'd say no. She'd keep doing that, and he said, yes, that's. So my mother would write a postcard to Mrs. Barnitz. Imagine, this before cell phones, She would write a postcard to Mrs. Barnitz and down her vacation spot. And I don't know if she wrote back or took care of us from there, I don't know. That's the way the mail was handled while she was away. And I always liked it when she came home, because she always had a little present for me and a nice present for my wife. This is home story. That's the barn and the barn is house. This is a late picture because back in my day there was steam engines. And here's a picture of the house that's there now. And the people that live in the Barnitz house now have bought that farm and they've made it into a wedding place. You can have a wedding or a reception or whatever. Okay. It's hard to imagine right now that this building with a siding was right beside my house, just up the road where the sort of sharp turn is. This set between the road and the railroad. This is a milk station. They loaded milk on a train car. And is this the picture we had, Steve, of the thing across the road?
The trestle.
That's
The ice.
Larry, can you see that? This came across the creek and the road from the ice pond, which was across the creek, where they left water in and blocked it off, shut off the inlet and the ice roads. They cut it and brought it over here and stored it in sawdust. And I suppose that's what they cooled the milk in the summer when it went on the train. I don't have any other idea how they would have done it. When we moved here in 37, the milk station was still there. Trucks brought cans in, and I don't know where they went. But this part where the ice was stored was all torn down. I used to play in the concrete footings and stuff that there was also just a little bit to the left of it was the Barnitz station, which had big blue signs on both sides, which was a railroad station. Okay. Now I'm going to try to show you how things work. I told you where my house was. The station should be up about here. Pine Road, the creek, the ice pond, the dam. The dam is no longer there, you know that. There were gates. There were control gates to control the amount of water that went into the mill. And there was floodgates that whenever the creek got high, they would open them so it wouldn't overflow. There was a mill pond, the mill. There was a tributary off of that to a sawmill, which you'll see a picture of after a bit, and one went off the Cooper's Mill. And the tail races went back into the creek right above where that bridge that Bixler's was. That's where they went back into the creek. This one you can still see where it went into the creek. This is the Barnitz house. This is the barn and house that's there now. The scale shed, you'll see it. We didn't show that picture yet, did we? No. The scale shed, which was right along the road. It was later called Stewart Park, George Stewart Foundation, with a park in there. You all know where that park is down here, down the road. They're working on it right now, doing some more paths around the southern. Stewart Park and Barnitz Mill. This is Barnitz Road. It goes down along that and comes out right at Joyce's house. Okay.
The warehouse.
Pardon?
The warehouse.
The warehouse is there. Oh, yeah. That's a good story, too. Anyway, the mill's here. This is to depict how the warehouse was powered. You're not going to believe this, but I'm going to tell you. We'll see a picture after a bit about a long slit in the mill on the third floor that shows the slit in the mill. And this warehouse was across the road. And this slit was, the warehouse was built so that this cable would come right up along the side of the warehouse. The warehouse was also run by water power through this cable. It was, I never seen the cable. It was torn down 2 years before we moved here. But the pulleys were still there, and it appeared to me the cable was about an inch in diameter. It was pretty heavy. Here's a picture from the Barnitz house on the corner of the porch, heading up the road. This is the sharp corner, and this is after the road was banked. Before, this was all level into the mill and all level around the corner. But whenever they put blacktop the road, which is after we moved here, then it was banked up. So you go faster around the corner. This is the scale shed. It's set right on the corner. That's the warehouse. That's the coal shed. This is a house that's set just down over the bank, a couple of steps between the road and the mill race that come in right behind it. You could, the back windows in that house, you could drop a line into the creek. In the mill race. It was that close to water. Between there and there was, this house was a garage.
Is that where the Schaefer's lived on the turn? Is that where the Schaefer's lived on the
Schaefer.
turn?
That's where the shape was down. Those girls I showed you on the picture. That was our house. Okay. All right. This is the mill on the side toward the Barnitz house. And before I forget, this is the sawmill. The sawmill and the cooper's mill, one beyond it. They sawed the lumber and made the barrels. Here's one of them. Here's a bunch loaded on a wagon. This was a water powered hoist. You pull the rope inside, down, and it lifted up. And you had to judge where to pull it to let stuff down. That's the way they loaded everything. So anyway, that's a picture of the mill there. This says Barnitz, I assume that says mill. Here. There's a slot where the cable come out. Now imagine this. From a turbine, a water run turbine that was down about 10 feet, the water dropped on that and spun. Run everything in the mill, and they geared, how they've done it, I don't know. They geared stuff up to run this cable across this, went across the road to run the warehouse. Whenever electric came up, there you can still stay a little. When the electric came up, they tore the cable down and electrified the warehouse, but the mill was still water powered. There's the mill pond. The waterway, the turbine was right 10 feet down here. I'm saying 10 feet. There was a outside because the water had to get the power from the drop to turn it. There was another little point, and the mill bridge. There were little bridges that went across all these, clear back to the Cooper's Mill, which will show you something later here. This is when the road was banked. Yeah, it says there is bank turn. Now this is that they're, since they've redone the mill, they didn't put that back on. So it doesn't look quite the same. This is a picture from the back side, and this is the Barnitz house. I don't know what year, that's why.
That's in the sixties, back then.
Yeah.
In the sixties, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Ron,
That's a picture. What was deteriorating. Well, with pretty strong with brothers trying to at this point. And they kept stuff in there.
Dad, we have a question.
What was that little building used for up there, Warner?
That,
Yeah.
that was just, room for some of the gearing. And to let some light in. Can you imagine all the gearing? Most of it was wood. And they had, belts, flat belts running off of a long, what they call them, Anyway, it was, that was the place, because that's right above the, where the power plant in the middle.
Hold your microphone up there.
This is what it looks like now.
Microphone.
Oh, thank you for that. Okay. Steve just took these pictures. This is the back of the mill. And of course, they're putting a whole bunch of pads. That's the barn there. This is a roof of the barn. Oh, those are pictures. That milk plant that I'm talking about, set right in here. Now, I think the road is a little wider now. There probably was a little more hole in there. But that's where it was. Back here is that ice pond. Here's the creek. So up creek a little ways, there was a place to let the water in. And down here was the gate to shut it off. And when it was all shut off, it froze in the winter. So they cut it, I don't know how big a blocks or anything, and put it up. Somehow they got it up on that thing and took it across the creek. And then they packed it and used it to cool the milk. Now this is below the dam where the ice pond comes back in, and whenever they drained it and whenever they weren't freezing water in the summer, they just let the water run through. And this is where it comes back out. That's there today. That was just taken a week ago. So that's still there. There's the sign that was on the mill. And that was their Barnitz family had that put on. Barnitz Mill was an elevator. The elevator meant the elevator was a wide strap, looked like a flat bell, with little buckets on. That's whenever the grain was put in and went down in the basement on a wooden slide, these little buckets picked it up and took it up to here. In this little cupola was a big round thing that had a, what would I call it, a chute. It was actually covered. It was like a pipe that went to every grain bin. These grain bins were deep. And wherever bin you wanted the grain to go, you had to turn that thing by hand. I've done it many times. Dad would say, go up and put it in the bin 6. So that's what it do. They roll marbles. That's what that was for. Right here, this piece here is where the pulley was. And one day I was there in the office when she said to my dad, Melvin, do you think you can pull that pulley off of the warehouse? She said, I'm afraid it'll fall. This is where they backed up to unload the grain. So I'm afraid it'll fall and hurt somebody. Dad said, well, I'll try. So I was alone. I was with my dad every minute, and I wasn't in school or had chores to do. I was with him. This is the control gate. These pieces are still down there. If you get down the road and look, you'll see these little pieces of concrete sticking up there, right below my home. I forget his name. Anyway, Dad backed the truck up there, hooked the rope to it. We went up to this windmill, And he stuck out there and loosened 2 or 3 with an adjustable wrench. Set screws, they were pretty big. They loosened. He came down, got in the truck, and boom, down it came. I don't know whatever happened to it, but he pulled it off there. But that, while this was electrified, and that was still on there, when you fired up the warehouse to run things, that turned. It still turned. So it was in the gear. This is a floodgate. The other one was a control gate. This is a floodgate. This went out here. And I'll tell you where these came with, where the dam went from. I think we have a picture of the boat going over with, Mom.
Yes.
Okay. This is, here they are. Here's some pieces that are still down. This is taken from the scale shed toward the warehouse. The cable went along the side. This warehouse was built specifically so that this would line up with that slot, so the cable would be able to work. This was the siding. There's something on there, I'm not sure what it is, but that came in right back in my house, like 10 feet. The siding came in, and this is the coal shed, where the coal was kept. Oh, okay. This is the control gate. This is the flag. We knew when Dad was coming home, his job was to correct whatever needed to be corrected on these. And he stuck a bar in this spot. And I don't know if you can see it there. There's a thing on that dropped in to one of these. So you pull it, it was going to clink. Pull it again, it would go clink. And whenever you wanted to let them down, Dad would pull this, slip this off, and boom, down they went. These little gears. And the Lord. And we would always know when Dad was coming home for supper, because we'd hear that going clink, clink. We know he was on his way. This is the floodgate. This is one down into the creek below the tank. This is taken. This is the barn of my home at Julie Creek. Taken, hooking up from the control reach. There's the picture now, the barn, there's my home. This is a picture taken crossing from my house up where the corridor is now. The Barnitz house. Of course, now this is a big corridor around it. See how flat this is? That's how flat everything was. Now we do the barn. This is how it is. That was just taken last week. Here's the story. After they stopped making barrels and started putting it in these bags, he put in what they call a hydraulic silo press, which was run by water power. I don't know how it worked, but it was a big deal of silo. This is 1904. That barn that you just saw is this. A tornado come through and damaged the Barnitz farm underneath the railroad tracks back. And also came straight across. It missed our house, luckily. And I don't know where it went, but it was heading toward the Bexler farm. And I don't think it hurt it. But anyway, that was a bad one. this is still pictures of some of the stuff that was laying around. That takes a good bit of wind, don't you think? That's it. Now, these are later pictures. These are diesels. And this is a signal. This is a one-track deal. When I lived at Barnitz, it was two tracks. And there was a signal west and a signal east. And a track walker came from Mount Holly up the tracks every day with his hammer and his thing that he pounded spikes in with on the railroad. And a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know how he carried it all. But anyway, every now and then you'd see him take that off and pound in a couple spikes. And then keep on walking up. And then he done something to these. These are the ones that were there then don't look anything like this. And I don't have a picture of that. But, anyway, he went to each one of them each day and did something. I don't know what he did. Oh boy. Barnitz Tiger. Earl McCoy and Grant McCoy. I think somebody has one of these uniforms. Paul Grout has one of them. Barnitz Tiger. Earl McCoy is a man that my family bought the house from up the road and where the boys grew up. He owned that. Grant, you know, you might remember I said Anna McCoy was one of the teachers in one of the pictures. I'm a person. Now, one thing I want to explain. Roller mills. What time? Anybody know what I mean by roller mill? You do.
I've seen the rolling mill at
Okay.
Eichmann's.
Well, at one time, grist mills ground the grain with stone. They were stones that one run on top of the other, one run and one stayed apart. And that ground the grain, ground the wheat, everything. A roller mill is a series of little machines, I would call them, and inside was a pair of rollers, steel rollers, put together much like a wringer washing machine. Those rollers run, and the wheat went through them and went from one to the other. When it got to the fifth or sixth one, depending how many they had, it was flour. And in between that time, all of the bran, which is the shell off the wheat, would fly off of that and go to a bin on the third floor. Bran was very light. They put bran in great big burlap bags and sold it to different places that they would mix it in with cowpea. And they had a lot of, I wanted to look up, but never did, how much wheat it took to make a pound of flour. It must be a lot, but Brenda's gonna look that up right now. I should have recorded it. By the way, Steve and Brenda put more time into this presentation than I did. I had the memory. Steve had the technology. And Steve and Brenda put a terrible amount of time in getting ready for this. So anyway, that's what a roller did. And in the fall of the year, people that back in the day after the corn was harvested, they'd get the nicest corn they could pick out, years of corn, and put it in their oven, in their cook stove. Everybody had a cook stove that I know. My mother would put corn, fill the oven. Sometimes let the oven door down. And sometimes she'd shut it. I don't know why that is, but I guess to get more heat, to do it quicker. But everybody butchered back then. What did they need cornmeal for?
On home.
On hogs. Thank you. Now known as sprouted. Anyway, different people wanted their corn toasted differently. Some liked it toasted real brown, some hardly at all, and so on. So, in the fall of the year, people could toast their corn, put it in a bag, put their name on it, and bring it to a mill. The bottom floor of Barnitz Mill was covered with corn in bags with names on, most times at least 2 layers. Of course, they couldn't do that all through the day, through a work day, because that was done on a stone. There was still a stone in Barnitz Mill when I had each one of those bags separately was picked up, taken to the second floor, put in the bin, the flat graved the corn into the stone. It ground, sent it down the chute to a sifter where it was taken out of the sifter, put back in the bag that the corn came in with the person's name on it. That was my job. My dad would dump the corn, throw the bag and the name down in little back steps. I would put it in the bag, tied with the name on it, and set it back out. Mrs. Barnitz asked my dad if he would do that in the evening. So that's what we did. I don't know if he got paid extra for that. I hope he did. But anyway, we ground cornmeal in the evenings for probably a month and a half. I mean, a long time. It seemed like every time we'd take a bag out, somebody'd bring another one in. So that's how the cornmeal in this area, people brought it in so long because they liked that brown on that stone. Well, we're finally getting to the end. These are postcards. I expected to leave soon for summer. Greetings from all the Barnitz brothers, to all your brothers. There's somebody at Barnitz who wants to see you. I'll never get lonesome in Barnitz while girls are so pretty. Oh, my. Well, anyway, the Sentinel interviewed me back a number of years. Students done some research on the mill. Now, I don't know who they are, and I don't, they're Dickinson College. No. Anyway, here's the people that helped. This man was a great help, Richard Tripp. He's the photographic curator. And he's done a lot. So anyway, does anybody else have any questions?
Well done.
Barnitz,
Bart said, what?
I think it was William
Barnitz, the middle name was Whistler. What's that in relation to?
William Victor Barnitz. And his dad was Ulysses Grant Barnitz, UG. I never knew him, but I knew Grandma. Okay, somebody.